Hey guys, I'm Monica. I am in Columbia College, class of 2015, and so my liberal bootcamp that I chose today was just fact-checking Paul Ryan's facts from the debate. Hence, yeah. I would love to talk about last night's debate, but I think that speaks for itself. So, but anyway, so one of the first facts that Paul Ryan talked about in the debate was that apparently 200 million Americans are going to lose insurance. Where does this figure come from? First of all, where this isn't just something that he actually pulled out of his. I will refrain. So where does this figure come from? He actually took it from the 2010 Congressional Budget Office report, which is a neutral agency. But the problem is that he actually left out a bunch of other numbers that he probably should have included. I'll quote the actual report. So the ACA changes the number of people who will obtain health insurance coverage through their employer by an amount that ranges from a reduction of emphasis 200 million to a gain of 300 million relative to what have occurred otherwise. So actually, the CBC even qualifies this by saying that about 3 million to 5 million people, 5 million fewer people on net will obtain coverage through their employer each year from 2019 through 2022. That would have been the case under prior law. So basically, what Paul Ryan didn't say is that this is under only people who are not going to be covered by their employer. But because you have universal health care, people are going to have the option of getting health care through the government. Henceforth, they're not necessarily going to be uninsured unless they choose to be, but then they'd have to pay whatever they'd have to pay, the tax or something. Also, yeah, I already wrote that. Okay, so the next thing that he actually said was that there were 6 studies that debunked the the Romney tax plan, which was, oh, excuse me, I said that wrong. So 6 studies did not debunk the tax policy center's finding on the Romney tax plan. So what are these 6 different entities that Ryan claimed to be studies? First was the Heritage Foundation, which would be a good hint that this isn't actually a really good study. First, because they actually used, in order to prove that this is a decent tax plan, they actually it's based on a misestimation of the cost of an obscure estate tax provision. So it's this one little detail in this huge tax code, one detail. Okay, and then there's the Harvard study, which says it's only possible for this tax plan to work if you fiddle with a definition of what the middle class is. So that would be including people who probably shouldn't be paying tax in the first place because they don't make enough money, or it's including more people who should be paying more taxes anyway because they're making more than what would be considered middle class income. So. And also, then you have the American Enterprise Institute. So the only way that this Romney's tax plan could work, if the subject investment income, if taxes are subject to investment income, so you don't need to raise taxes on the middle class, but this still doesn't actually deal with the issue of how the middle class is defined. And then there was actually a study that was just a blog post. It was just someone in their opinion. So it was this guy from the American Enterprise Institute, that study that I just mentioned, that's just a blog post. Okay, so, and then he talks about taxpayer-funded abortions. So he says that actually abortions through the Affordable Health Care Act are going to be funded by the federal government. Yeah, technically it's not true. So, as Nini has just mentioned, so the Affordable Health Care Act provides no direct funding for abortion except in cases of rape, incest, and to save the life of the mother. And this actually are the same rules that were used during Medicaid. Obviously, he's just being wrong, even though probably a bunch of us disagree on this, especially Gnarl, Pro-Choice America. If Zoe was here, I bet she'd have a few things to say about that. Oh, you are here, okay. She does have a few things to say about that. And then also at the same time, you have the National Right to Life Committee, who isn't very happy about it either because it's a conspiracy theory to them. They're oh yes, the federal government is still going to, fund abortion, even though it explicitly says it does not. So whatever. And finally, one of the most egregious things that was probably said during the debate was that Ryan compares the unemployment rate of Scranton, Pennsylvania, to the rest of the country. Yeah. So he asked Joe Biden, so what's the unemployment rate in Scranton? He's 10%, and he's well, that's how it's going in the rest of America, which is obviously untrue because if you look at the job report, it's 7.8% currently, which has gone down since the past few months. So this is actually obviously just shows I don't know what Ryan was trying to pull with this logic of how one city could actually represent the entire United States, but I think it just goes to show that Ryan's logic isn't following in most places.
I
So,
don't think that's even the unemployment rate in Scranton. I think it's lower than that.
10%?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's lower than that.
Then Paul Ryan lies on many fronts. So that's basically it, and hopefully you don't now know not to trust Paul Ryan.
Well, we already knew that Paul Ryan was full of malarkey, so